Hello and welcome to episode 33 of MMO Weekly, presented as always by Metsmerizedonline.com. I'm your host, Sal Manzo, along with my co-host and executive editor, Mike Mayer, and we're joined by special guest, new AAA hitting coach for the Mets this season, Collin Hetzler. Collin, thanks so much for taking the time with us tonight, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Of course, and before we get going, Collin told me he shot a 73 today on his round of golf. Before anything, that might be the most impressive thing we talk about all night. I just got to throw it out there that's really cool. So part-time baseball coach, full-time golf today. I love that. But
yeah, I've been playing way too much golf this first month of the year.
I'm sure you're gonna be in a month from now. You're gonna be saying, "I wish I could play more golf with all the spring training starting." But that's great. We 100%. Love that. Thanks again for coming on with us. We really appreciate it. Like I mentioned before, Collin's going to be the new AAA hitting coach this year for the Mets. Really excited to see, what you're going to be doing with the young guys there. And, I just want to get Met fans a little acquainted with you. Obviously, we talked about what you're going to be doing this year, but can you kind of tell us, what you were doing before all this and how, the job with the Mets and particularly this year with AAA kind of came about for you?
Yeah, no problem. So I'm going into my third season with the Mets. The first two seasons, I was the complex hitting coordinator. So I was kind of in charge of the lower levels of our hitting department. So it would be low A, complex league, rookie ball, and the academy and the DR. So basically my job was to just support the coaches and kind of implement some specific systems in the hitting department in terms of like how we train, how we design practices, and just like kind of develop an identity for the lower levels in terms of what we value and how we want guys to go about their training offensively. And sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So how is that going to kind of be different for you this year, going from that to, you're going to be a coach on a daily basis. How is that going to be a change for you?
It's going to be an adjustment for sure. I got a little bit of a taste of being an affiliate coach last year. So I spent 2 months in Binghamton with our DoubleA team, July and August. I was covering for our DoubleA hitting coach at the time, took a leave of absence. So I went up there and it was definitely different. You're working with a more advanced hitter that already has a solid foundation and is probably only like, a tweak or two away from being, knocking on the door of the big leagues compared to, your 16 and 17-year-old guys in the DR to where, strength and stability is the main thing that you're focusing on, and just like having those guys focus on getting really good at rotating really fast, and then just practicing, hitting the ball at all fields down there. So it's a different animal because at the DR, you're going to have probably 50, 60 hitters. And then at the complex, you're going to have, probably another 30 or 40. And then you hop over to low A and you try and help out the low A affiliate coach at the same time. So it's a little bit more advanced, a little bit more intimate of a job in terms of you've got 12 or 15 hitters that you're working with on a daily basis rather than, bouncing around to 3 different spots for a week or two at a time. So you really get to just like have more meaningful conversations with those guys and get a better idea of how they think about hitting, what they're thinking about in the box. You get to watch all of their live at-bats in game and see how that changes or how their practice transfers into the game. So it was a little bit of an adjustment, but it was fun. A lot of times you just kind of let the hitter kind of drive the conversation and just like let him ask questions and maybe try and lead him down certain roads to try to maybe, get your point across or get to a point that you were trying to make with him. So it's kind of a long-winded answer, but it's just going to be a little bit more specific, individualized training, the higher that you get with, the higher you go in affiliates.
And before I kind of piped in and interrupted you there, so where were you before the Mets and how did it kind of come about you coming to the Mets?
Before the Mets, I was at Driveline Baseball in Seattle. It's a training facility on the south side of Seattle. I was there for 3 years, there for the 2018, 19, and 20 seasons. I was a hitting trainer and a hitting operations manager there. And then I guess it would have been probably late November, maybe early December of 2020. I got an email from the Mets, and they were just like, hey, we've got this position open. It's a complex hitting coordinator job. We'd like to interview you for it. And so I went through the interview process with the Mets. We had like 6 different interviews with 6 different people. And then eventually, they offered me the job. So packed up all my stuff and drove from Seattle to Florida. And now here I am.
That's great. And, obviously want to talk a little bit more about your position this year, but just, from what you were talking about being the complex hitting coordinator, do you think it makes you more well-rounded now, going from, like you said, dealing with so many different hitters, so many different players, to now it's, not ramp back, but a little bit more selective as you're only going to be working with your team now? Do you think that kind of helped you in this new role, having to work with, like you said, not less developed players, but in the lower developmental levels of, different players, now getting to work with what you're saying, players that are, maybe a tweak or two from, taking the step to the big leagues? Do you think working with those more developmental players now is, helped shape you a little bit better, being at the AAA level, helping with those kind of hitters?
Yeah, I think there's definitely going to be some benefit to it. The lower that you go and the younger the player that you work with, like, the kind of the weirder you can get with some of the training and practice design that you can get away with those guys. I think the higher up you go from level to level, the more skeptical hitters are in terms of like different or like kind of exotic practice design. But as long as you can kind of explain the why and the reasoning behind it, they're usually good sports and will at least give it a shot. And some of it's works really well, and some of it is like, man, we're probably not going to do that again.
And to kind of touch on you coaching in the lower levels, who are a couple of hitters in the lower levels you worked with over the last year or so that Mets fans might not know yet or are just starting to hear about?
Yeah, so there's some pretty good talent at the lower levels. I'll start in high A. I think William Lugo is one guy to really look for this year. He had a really strong year between low A and high A last year. I think he's going into his age 21 season, and he's already had some success in high A. Big, strong kid. He's like 6'3", 240, and we haven't moved him off a shortstop yet. Hits the ball extremely hard. I think he's gone up to 115 so far, and he's, I don't even know if he's 21 yet. So that's one guy to look for. And then some younger guys that will be at the complex this year. Jesus Baez is a guy to watch. He's another shortstop. Not nearly as big. He's like 5'10", 180, but I think he's still 17, and he's already hitting balls 110, 111 miles an hour. So he's got some serious raw physical talent that's going to be exciting to see where that takes him. And then another guy that probably a lot of guys haven't heard about, but had a really strong year last year in the DR Dominican Summer League, is Yohairo Cuevas. So he's a left-handed hitting first baseman and outfielder, and he's always had really good swing decisions and play discipline and got on base a ton. He was always like well above league average in walk rate. And last year he really started to like figure out how to drive the baseball, put some balls in the gaps, pull the ball in the air, and like burn the outfielder to the left center gap. So he's really been getting after it this offseason as well at the academy and at his house. So that's probably going to be another guy that I'm looking to or would expect to have a pretty good debut stateside. So those are two guys that I wouldn't be surprised to have a couple of really good years.
Yeah, and I mean, between Lugo, Baez, and I know we've talked about Junior Tillian before too. The Mets have 3 good, young, powerful bats in the lower levels, and they're all still playing shortstop to some degree, which is incredibly impressive. And like you mentioned, Lugo hadn't hit 21 yet. Baez is only 17, and Tillian was a teenager playing in full season ball. So certainly names to keep an eye on for Mets fans as we go into this year. And I know Mets minors, we've had our top 30 coming out, and Baez, Lugo are in it, and my own top 30, Baez and Lugo will be in it. And both of those guys will be in my top 22. I mean, these are guys definitely for fans to keep an eye on in 2023.
Yeah, Junior Tillian is another guy that doesn't get nearly enough love. I mean, he came out of nowhere this year, so he I think he signed in 2020, so he didn't get any professional games in the Dominican Summer League. So his first experience of pro ball was the FCL in Florida, and he was barely 18 and could barely pick up the bat. He just like wasn't physically ready to compete at that level. The bat to ball skills was always there. He could put the bat on the ball his first year. It just wouldn't go anywhere, right? And then he gets after it in the offseason and then comes back last year in 2022 and just hits like 12 pumps out of nowhere in the Florida State League when we were expecting him to be, in the complex again. So that's one guy to keep an eye on. And then honestly, like we've got some pretty good depth at the lower levels at shortstop, because Kevin Villavicencio is another guy who got some time in low A last year. And he didn't exactly tear it up, but he was barely 18. He can play shortstop. He can play all over the infield. Elite bat to ball skills. Sometimes he's a guy right now swings at everything and hits everything. So he gets himself out sometimes to his elite bat to ball skills, like to his own detriment sometimes. And then obviously Jet Williams is going to be another shortstop that's going to rise pretty quickly. And then there's another guy who he might have been the best player in the Florida Complex League last year. His name's Diego Mosquera. He's a Venezuelan shortstop that had a really, really good year in the DSL in 2021 and was just lighting it up in extended spring training last year. And then tore a labrum in his shoulder. So he missed all of last year, but he's back healthy now again. So it's going to be really interesting to see the different lineups that Lowe is going to be able to create. It's very possible they're going to have 4 or 5 shortstops on the field at once at 4 or 5 different positions, which is a really good problem to have, and just is kind of kudos to our international scouting department for picking out guys that can play.
Yeah, it's never a bad thing when you can throw 4 or 5 different guys at shortstop and just not bat an eye, and they all have, like you're talking about, different offensive potentials too. So yeah, and I mean, you have Lindor at the major league level. We have Mauricio, who we're going to talk about later in the show. So shortstop is definitely turning into a strong point in the Mets organization. Yeah,
no doubt. It's definitely a position of depth for us. And they're not just players that are depth; they're all good players. So it's a good problem to have.
Yeah, absolutely. And before, Mike, I know you kind of teased it, but before we go on to kind of some of the guys you might be working with this year, I'm just kind of curious as far as the organizational philosophy for you, if there is one. Obviously you talked about those younger prospects, those developmental players, strength and stability, you said, seems to be a common thing that you off the bat want to work on with them, rotational trunk power, things of that nature. But are there certain either technical philosophies, like hitting technical philosophies, or in-game at-bat philosophies that you work with the guys, that as far as to get them to that next level? Is it a mix of both depending on the player? I'm just kind of curious now, like if there's any organizational philosophies. Did you hear a lot about that with pitching? I feel like at the minor league level, different, pitching philosophies, pitch selection, things of that nature that they do. But I don't know if you hear about as much of it on the hitting side as far as technically goes. So just kind of curious there. If there's any, like steadfast philosophies that, the Mets have at the developmental levels that you're kind of, putting into the lower level developmental players.
Yeah, for sure. So I think the Yankees kind of coined the phrase "hit strikes hard" is their kind of their mantra. And I think what we're rolling with this year is 95 or walk. So if you can't hit this ball 95 or harder, like, we're going to take our walk. So we're going to hit the ball hard, and if it's a pitch that we can't hit hard, we're just going to lay off of it and take the walk and let the next guy do the damage. And obviously, like, technically, there's a million different rabbit holes that we could go down in terms of the swing, but I guess the simplest way to do it is, like, land in an athletic position and rotate fast. And then from there, like, we can go a million different directions depending on how that athlete moves and where they generate their speed and power. But generally speaking, it's like land in a good spot and rotate fast.
Awesome. Yeah, I've spent many a nights on TikTok, believe it or not, scrolling through and hearing about snapping the barrel, and it's put my brain in a bit of a pretzel since I've heard of that. It's a new thing, but it seems to be working for guys. Just, there's so many different things now that happen. It's really interesting to hear. Like,
there's a million different like catchphrases out there, and all of them, have value for certain guys, and all of them, can make other guys, go haywire. So it's all just, how you communicate with the hitter and how they perceive and understand their swing, and just kind of, it's always a puzzle to figure out what makes each guy tick.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, talking about, snapping the barrel, you're going to have some dudes in AAA this season that can be doing exactly that. Particularly you could be working with the likes of Ronnie Mauricio, who we mentioned, Francisco Alvarez, Mark Vientos, and obviously Brett Beatty, who we saw last year. It's a ton of offensive potential. I just want to get your thoughts on, working with that group and how you can, potentially, hopefully help them, to get better for the big league level.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be a serious gauntlet of a middle of the order for the league to have to go through. Yeah. Hopefully they do really well and they get their shot in the big leagues, and they're, not with me for very long, but that, is obviously above my pay grade. So just in terms of when I get to work with them, it's, we're going to have some challenging practices, whether it's like machine work or a couple different machines, throwing a couple different pitches from different angles, or I'll get up there and I like to throw a lot of mixed BP.
Sure.
And generally speaking, guys will like that more than the machine, just because it's more of a, they see the arm, they see the shape coming out of the hand. Yep. And, some guys pick up spin, some guys pick up grip. So I'll throw as much mixed BP as I can to those guys, and just try and get them ready. And I'll know, where their honey hole is, and I'll know where their miss is. So when I'm throwing mixed BP, I'm trying to break some bats. So it's always a battle, and it gets competitive because I know where their holes are, and they know that I know where their holes are. So it's fun. And we've got, different feedback tools that we can use for strike zone if we want to do at bats. If we want to play a game in terms of, all right, you got to hit this one 105 above 10. Right. Otherwise you're out, or whatever it is. So just keeping those guys locked in and engaged, making it fun, keeping it competitive, and trying to keep it as game-like as possible. And then from there, each guy's got their strengths, and they've all got their weaknesses as well. So we'll try and build on their strengths and then also work on their weaknesses at the same time.
So what do you bring it up to? What are you hitting on the gun then?
So I don't ever go all the way back to the mound. I'll put up a ramp in front of the mound, and I'll sit anywhere from like 69 to 72. And from Little League World Series distance, that's probably low to mid nines, which is, it can get on you. If I want to try and blow it by you from the front of the mound, I think I can. I can probably get up. If I really wanted to, I could get up to probably 78, maybe 79. So
what are you using for breaking balls then?
So I've got a slider slurve that I can kind of manipulate to where I can make it sweep. I can make it have some depth. That's probably my best pitch. And then I've got a true curveball 12-6, and I've got a splitter that I use for a changeup. I was never able to figure out a circle change, so I just started throwing splitters.
There you go.
And then I can sink my fastball, and then I can make it right if I want to. So I've got a decent repertoire from 48 feet. You move me back onto the actual mound though, and everything is going to fall short. Gravity's going.
I was going to say that kind of sounds like Cody senga from 48 feet.
So yeah, that's a good comp. I'll take that every time. Man. That would be electric if I could actually throw hard, but I got to move the mound up and throw from the front of the mound, and then I've got a shot.
There you go. I imagine it must get a little awkward though if you start breaking bats. Missing barrels there, guy. You got to keep it civil. You got to keep the guys confident. You don't want to make them sort them too much there. So I'm sure that's a nice little balance. So that's cool.
Yeah, I'll throw one in their nitro zone if they need it. But those guys, they've got enough barrels. They need someone to challenge them.
There you go. And obviously, among that group, we talked about Francisco Alvarez. He's not only probably the Mets' best offensive prospect, but one of the best in baseball. I think he ranked number 3 at top 5 prospects not too long ago. So like, what is your plan in particular when you are working with him to help him improve? And also a guy like that caliber prospect, how do you try and challenge a guy like that as well to keep him motivated? I'm sure, you don't want a guy reading their press clippings or like that, but you still want to keep them motivated and get them up to the big leagues, as fast as you can. So I'm just curious how, you're looking to help him improve, going into the season.
Yeah. I mean, Alvy's a special player, and it makes my job really easy just because I don't have to motivate him. He's extremely self-motivated, knows what he has to do, knows what he's got to get better at. He's already down here working. He's here, you know, a few weeks early working on, you know, his defense, his receiving, blocking, throwing. He's hitting every day. So he's locked in. Like he doesn't need any motivation from me. But I'll just, you know, give him some challenging batting practice and some different machine work to try to expose what, you know, few misses that he has. And the majority for him, in my opinion, is just like, particularly on breaking balls, like he needs to figure out which ones he should pull and which ones he needs to shoot the other way.
Sure.
So for the most part, he's pretty good at swing decisions. Like he draws his walks, especially in AAA. They were nibbling at him all year last year, and he did a really good job of taking his walks. When he gets a little bit over aggressive, he will, you know, chase sliders down and away, which you could say for every hitter that ever lived. And he's got good bat to ball skills. So like if he tries to pull a pitch that's that far down and away, it's probably going to be, you know, a ground ball to the left side. So just working on being able to identify which slider he needs to burn the right fielder with instead of the left fielder. And then obviously in terms of fastballs, like just being able to cover the very top of the zone, especially with premium velocity. Like it's not a lack of bat speed by that guy. That guy moves the bat faster than almost anybody I've ever seen. So again, you can say those two things about almost every hitter that ever lived. Fastballs at the very top of the zone, and then like figuring out what to do with the slider down and away. But I would say those would be the two main things that we're locked in on right now. And for the most part, he's got pretty much everywhere else in the zone figured out. So,
well, like you mentioned, and we've talked about it multiple times on the broadcast on here before, it's just I've never seen a Mets prospect that's this polished offensively at that age. I mean, he was a teenager in AAA and he walked 17% of the time. Like that just doesn't happen.
Yeah, guys locked in. I mean, people don't give him enough credit for how intelligent of a human being he is. Like he taught himself English in a couple of years. Wow. So he's like, he's a smart kid, and he's very baseball. He's got a high baseball IQ. He knows what pitchers are trying to do to him. He got to the point in DoubleA last year where he would just bait guys. He would know what they're trying to do to him, and he would just bait them and then make them pay. So I wouldn't expect anything else from Alvy other than, you know, continued success at every level.
Yeah, and I think that's really helped him improve on the defensive side too, where Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom both pitched to him last year, and they were talking about his game planning, and other minor league pitchers I've talked to is just how incredible he is at working through a game plan with them, again, at his age and the limited amount of minor league games that he's played. Yeah, I think the Mets have a pretty special one in Alvarez, and I think he's going to be the Mets catcher for probably quite some time.
Yeah, I mean, he's a special guy, and credit to Bob Natal, our catching coordinator, for working closely with him the last couple of years. They have a great relationship, and you'll see them working and getting after it in the cage every day after we're done hitting. So credit to him, and then credit to Alvy. I mean, he's just a super diligent worker. He's very meticulous about his defensive work that he has to do, and you know, he's only going to get better at the more work and time that he puts in.
Awesome. No, and you know, I want to transition from Alvarez to another Mets prospect. Mikey teased it before, Ronnie Mauricio. I think I've heard his name so much over the last few years. Also, obviously, he's got a ton of raw power that's starting to come through. Especially saw that this winter in the Dominican Winter League, really did well there. But he seems to need to improve his swing decisions to get on base more. So just kind of wondering how you can work with him to achieve that. You know, if it's more swing selection, you know, or you know anything else. Just kind of curious there.
Yeah, I mean, his swing decision is going to be the main thing that we're going to work on, and it's just going to be trying to get him to shrink his zone, right? So, like, he's immensely talented. Like, he's got talent oozing out of his body to where I've seen him, you know, hit a ball that's at his neck over the right field fence, and I've seen a ball hit him off of his shoelaces over the center field wall. So, like, the fact that he's able to do that and is that good of a bad ball hitter is just inherently impressive on its own. Obviously, the more that you swing at those pitches, like, you're not going to be able to do that every time. There's going to be some weak contact. You're going to get yourself out early in counts, to where if you take that, then you're kind of in the driver's seat in 1-0, 2-0, 2-1. So for him, it's just going to be a lot of like strike zone feedback, and then mix BP, tell him to lay off specific parts of the zone or specific pitches, or you can wheel out a couple of like dual machines and put both balls on there at the same time, and then tell him like, hey, you only got to hit this one or hit this one, or there's a lot of different ways you can get creative with it. You can cut the plate in half and be like, all right, we're hunting outer half only, or we're hunting top half only, or whatever it is. And I think that's probably the most difficult thing to train in a cage is swing decisions,
right?
Because it can get very tedious to where, you know, if you see enough balls out of the zone, it starts to become taking practice, and hitters want to hit. But Mauricio did a really good job last year of being diligent about his work. He was always using the 7 ball across the plate and using the hit tracks in the TrackMan strike zone on the screen behind the cage for feedback to get a better idea of, you know, what's in the zone and what's more of a borderline, you know, 50% expected strike. So just if we can get him to lay off the edge pitches and just hunt middle all the time, he's going to be really dangerous.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about prospects and you talk about how they have good raw power like Mauricio does, and but they have some swing decision issues, and he's had an on base under 300 last 2 years. You just, without looking at the numbers, you just expect that he's also a guy that struck out a ton, which isn't the case with him. I mean, he's been right around 23% the last couple of years, which is low anyway. And then you take into account the fact that he's well below the league average age. I think that's certainly something to look forward this year, if he is able to kind of change his swing decisions and get rid of some of that soft contact. You already have a guy that's not striking out a ton and has really good power potential. He has a chance to turn into a really good offensive player if he can make the changes that we've talked about and you've talked about. So, I mean,
yeah, he's 100%. I mean, he's got arguably the most juice out of all 4 of the guys that we're talking about. I think he got up to 117 last year.
Wow.
And all 4 of those guys are 115 plus, but I think he might have been the only guy that got up to 117, which is insane with a minor league ball. But yeah, the bat to ball skills though is there. Like you said, like he's a couple years younger than the average player in DoubleA last year, and his K rate was below league average. So it just kind of speaks to his ability to put the bat on the ball. We just got to make sure that, you know, we have more barrels and less weak contact, obviously, and all of that comes with, you know, just kind of keeping it as simple of an approach as possible. And it's like kind of goes back to that 95 or walk. Like if you can't hit this 95, for Ronnie, it's probably be 105 because of the juice that he's got. But yeah, just like hunt middle all the time. And then if it's slightly not middle, it's probably still going to be, you know, an expected strike of 75% or higher.
No, that's great. And, you know, speaking of bat to ball skills, good transition there. Jeff McNeil, pretty good at it. Won the batting title in 2022. Is probably the best at everybody with that. Yeah. In your opinion, I'm just wondering how a player like him is so successful in today's game with that kind of approach that seems to be pretty unique compared to this era of baseball. As far as, you know, you're talking about the hard hit rates, things of that nature, you know, guys, a lot of hitting for power, strikeouts up, that whole, you know, whole thing now. But McNeil's a guy that obviously is a contact first, and he's seen a lot of success with that. So I'm just kind of, you know, curious your thoughts on his approach and how it plays still in today's game now with, you know, power being such a prominent role.
Yeah, I mean, he might have arguably the best bat to ball skills in the world. I mean, he had a 10% K rate last year in the big leagues, which is just incredible. But I don't think Jeff gets enough love for the juice that he's got in his bat. Like he got up to 110 in exit velocity last year, which is 54th percentile, so he's slightly above league average in terms of how hard he hits the ball. And he slugged 450. So I mean, in terms of a second baseman, that's, you know, can't ask for a whole lot more than that. Right. Like he had 40 doubles. Like I think if he wanted to, you know, hit 20 home runs a year, he could. But that's just not his game, right? So he's going to live somewhere in the 300s. He's going to have his 40 doubles. He's going to do what he does, and it's a perfect, complement to the offense that we have. So I think it was really fun to watch last year, him getting back to being Jeff McNeil. And he's just kind of a throwback player, but at the same time, like he doesn't get enough love for the juice that he does have. 40 doubles plays, and all the way up to 110 and extra velocity also plays. So people are sleeping on Jeff's juice a little bit.
Well, we're going to get to that because the Mets did, and thankfully they keeping him for a little while longer, which is good. But a quick follow-up with that. Obviously, shift is banned this year going into the season. I've talked so much about how players are going to benefit from that. Is McNeil going to suffer from that a little bit? Because obviously we know left side was open. He took that all day, every day because, the skills that he had. But I'm just wondering if you think that might affect his game at all. I would imagine not much because he hit the ball wherever he wants anyway, but just kind of curious there.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think it's going to affect him all that much. Like, if anything, it's going to help him. But like you said, like if he wants to shoot one over the third baseman down the line, he can do it. If he wants to, burn guys in the right center field gap, he can do that too. So he is truly like a line-to-line hitter, and it's a lot of fun to watch. And he's got great control, not only in spraying, but how high or low he wants to hit the ball. So I'm sure that if you talk to him and the infield is just like playing super fast that day, maybe he's gonna like think about having a lower ball flight, or if it's really slow and he's gonna try and hit it a little bit higher in the air. Like, that's a guess. I never actually had that conversation with him, but I think that is like kind of on the level of bat to ball and feel for the barrel that he has.
Sure.
So kind of speaking of shift, how does that come into play as a hitting coach with not having the shift or the pie shift that they've had in the minor leagues, or now in the major leagues where they're going to the shift rules that they're going to have this year? How does that change anything you do as a hitting coach for certain hitters or overall at all?
No, especially not for me. Like, my answer to that is just hit it over everybody and hit it over the fence. Like, let's just do that. Make it easy. No one's catching it if you hit it over the fence. Hitting's hard enough, and I think if you start to try to place the ball rather than just hit it where it's pitched, then your brain's going to work a little bit slower. The bat's going to move a little bit slower. You're going to go away from just like playing the game to like getting a little bit too cute.
Right.
No, yeah, it makes sense. And I mean, that's what makes Jeff McNeil so special, is the fact that he can do that. Like you're talking about, you shouldn't teach that, but Jeff McNeil is so good that he can do it. And that's just what makes him different than pretty much anyone else in Major League Baseball. Yeah,
I mean, he's definitely an outlier in that sense. There's not a lot of people that can have success the way that he's having success, and it just kind of goes to his elite bat to ball skills.
Yeah, absolutely. And, touch on it real quick, Mike. Mets got to steal with that extension for McNeil. We don't have to go crazy on it, but for a player his caliber, for what they got, nice to see somebody besides the Braves get a team-friendly deal around here. So very happy about that.
It's unreal what they're able to do. What the Braves are able to sign these players to. It's unbelievable.
Well, I'll say it like this. We keep hearing about the culture. So folks like yourself and everyone else at the minor league level, you're going to help getting those team-friendly deals now in the future for the Mets. That's how it's going to be, right? We're building this culture up here. Everyone's going to want to be in New York.
Good culture definitely helps.
Absolutely. But, Mike, great, obviously steal for the Mets, right?
I mean,
every time.
He basically this year he's got the $6.25 million, which is what he was going to get anyway. And then really what you're looking at is the last 2 years. It's essentially like a 2-year deal for $31.5 million. I mean, even if he's not a power hitter, that's still, with his ability to play defense like he does at multiple spots. I mean, he was a 5-WAR player last year. I mean, $15 million for a potential 4 or 5 WAR players, nothing now, and it'll be even less in 3 years. So yeah, I don't see any issues with that, and I don't see any real issues with his skills aging either. I still think he's going to be a productive player at 34, 35 because of the skills that he does have. And he's a good athlete. I mean, I think that kind of gets hidden too with McNeil, is how good of an athlete he is. I know you guys are talking about golf earlier. I mean, he's one of the best golfers there is in baseball. So, I mean, the guy's just an all-around talent. And I think the Mets did a great job by locking him up. And I'm sure Jeff, I mean, he said it himself that he's a New Yorker. He's a New Yorker now, and that's where he wanted to be. So, I mean, I think there's a great deal for both sides to make sure that he stays with the Mets even longer.
Yeah, music to my ears hearing people want to come here. I'm not used to that. It's amazing, Collin. This is just we're over the moon. All these players want to be here. The team doesn't want to trade away good players. Just the transition. You've come in a great time with the organization. How things have turned too. I'd imagine just everywhere. It's just excitement, no matter what. Just the potential with the team, and just knowing that the ownership and management is putting such a commitment to winning at every level. I would think, right?
Yeah, 100%. It's like I've got a handful of friends in the industry that work for other teams, and they ask me, about my experience with the Mets, and I'm saying, man, it's a great time to be a Met. We've got an owner that is a genuine fan of the Mets and has given the minor leagues and the major leagues infinite resources to where, like, very, very often are we told no if we need something, and that's a massive luxury and competitive advantage across a number of other teams in the league. So it's a really good time to be a Met, whether it's player, coach development, anyone. It's exciting, and I think it's only going to get better.
Mike, I think you have one more question. Why don't you go ahead? No, that was it. I kind of wanted to. He touched on it about how it is to have. I mean, even as a minor league coach, you have to see and kind of understand what Steve Cohen does. I mean, he's doing things that no owner's really done before, unless you want to talk like about Steinbrenner with the Yankees. I mean, with spending, and like you said, it's not just players, it's coaches that they've hired that actually took lesser roles with the Mets, but seemingly got a higher paycheck, and other stuff in the minor leagues, like adding coaches, adding an analyst with every team, just different stuff that he's done to make the organization better, which has strictly been because he's a fan of the Mets and he has the money to do so.
Yeah, and I'll give you a perfect example. It happened today. We hired a new hitting coach this year for our DoubleA team. He was with the previous organization. I won't say which one, but we had a couple of our systems guys that were out at the field while we were setting up BP on the field today. So the hitting coaches were setting up the machines and the nets and everything like that, and then the systems guys were setting up the 2 TrackMan right behind home plate and getting everyone's blast ready and just making sure that we had all of the different tech that we like to use every day, just like set up and ready for when the players are out there, before the players get out there. That way we just roll right into practice, and it's not a hindrance, and it doesn't, disturb the flow of practice. And I was talking to our new guy, and he was like, man, it's awesome. You guys have an entire department dedicated to just setting up and tearing down this tech, and then helping, create reports and just like being the bridge to the coaches. He was like, last year, if I wanted to have 2 TrackMan and blast out here, like, I'd have to wheel them out. I'd have to set them up. I'd have to tear them down. Guys would have to share a blast because we didn't have one for everybody. And, I may not have enough iPads. So, it's absurd the amount of iPads that we have at our minor league complex. There's an entire room that's like almost filled with iPads. So it's great to have the resources that we do. And it's great to be a part of an org that has that type of support from ownership. So it just makes our jobs a lot easier.
Love it. That's great. And, it seems the theme of everything that we get to talk to now with folks at the minor league level like yourself, it's just the communication and the resources and the commitment to developing and winning seems to be second to none now. It's a lot of fun and exciting for us as fans because the future seems bright on a lot of levels here. It's great. But I think that's everything, that we have for you. I want to keep you all night, Collin. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Have a great spring. We're excited to see what happens for you for that. And obviously we'll check on you during the season. Wish you a lot of success there. Mike, thanks a lot. And for everybody, we'll catch up next week. Everything that's, going on in Mets land. SMY, sign Keith Hernandez. I want it done by next episode. Stop messing around. All right, we'll leave it on that note, everybody. And until then, let's go Mets.